Ba, ba, ba. Hello, everybody. It's Craig here from Upside Down Shark with another installment of the Quarantine Sessions. Today, I'm joined by I'm going to just say it. He is our smartest guest we've ever had on the website, Dr. Henry. Oh no, I've already messed it up. What was this? Mahncke. Henry Mahncke. We'll get that in post.
That's all right.
Dr. Henry Mahncke, PhD, CEO of Posit Science. How are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine, all things considered.
Yes, myself as well. For those unfortunate people who do not know yourself, let us know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I am really a scientist by training. I did a PhD in neuroscience or brain science at the University of California, San Francisco back in the day. And what I studied in that lab was brain plasticity, how the brain reorganizes and changes itself through learning and experience. And I did a couple things since then. I suppose I should mention I briefly used to work for the British government, since I'm talking to a Brit. I spent a few years working for the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, where I was working to develop science and technology partnerships between the US and the UK. And I'll tell you, you used to have a very lovely consulate here in San Francisco in the poshest part of town, but unfortunately, eventually the FCO sold it. So here we are. And then after that, I joined Posit Science, where I am now. And what we do at Posit Science is we put that idea of brain plasticity and brain change to work. We've built brain training exercises in a program we call BrainHQ. And these are designed to speed up and make more accurate information processing in the brain. And in that sense, help improve things like memory, attention, and speed, and real world skills. And so, we're excited about it because what the science tells us is that, well, just about anyone can work hard to change their brain for the better and then have a better life as a result of it.
And if you don't believe that, that it works, I believe that Henry he didn't read a single word of that. That was all just off the top of his head. He was ready to go just like that.
It is what I do for a living.
Before we get into the hard graft of it, a little icebreaker. Pizza or pasta? Which one are you?
If it's a quick meal, pizza. Nothing nicer than getting a fresh slice all right off the street. But if I'm sitting down for a nice meal with my wife, we'll go out for Italian and have a nice bowl of pasta.
Very, very. What pizza would you be?
What pizza would I be? What pizza would I be?
Only the hardest hitting questions here.
Absolutely. Well, I think I'd be one of those sort of off the beat pizzas. Maybe pesto, maybe a fried egg on top.
Oh, nice.
Crust like that.
Yes.
Not your everyday slice that you're going to scarf down by the zillion, but something a little more unusual.
Savor the taste. That's what you're here for.
That's right. Know you're getting something different. Maybe you like it, maybe you didn't, but it's the first time you had it, and you're going to remember it.
So let's talk about video games, shall we?
Sure.
So what I know about you is that you're a very smart man and that you have lots of research in the measures of cognitive performance, the standards of quality of life, and real world performance and how they link to video games. Now, recently, let's just say some famous people say that video games are a waste of time. What is your research find, and what would you say to those people?
Oh, well, maybe to say a couple of things about that. Maybe I'll start off here. At Posit Science, we're building brain training exercises, and they're similar to video games in some way, but they're also different than video games. And I'll start off there. And then I'm going to loop back to whether video games are or are not a waste of time. How's that sound?
Sounds good.
So, when you build brain training exercises, they often look like video games. They're things that you do and you try to get better at them, and they make your brain, faster and more accurate and so forth and so on. And I would say the big difference between a regular video game, and I play a lot of video games, I'll say that right off the bat. The big difference between video games and brain training is that when you play a video game, you generally get really good at the video game, right? You get really practiced at it. You know the maps, you know the weapons, you know the strategy. You're good at that video game. Doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be better at another video game, and certainly doesn't necessarily mean that those skills are going to transfer to real life in any way. Are they going to help you have a better memory when you're at work and your boss is trying to tell you what to do? Probably not. With brain training exercises, what we're trying to do is bring some of those same ideas about intensive practice, but develop the game, the exercise, I might say, in such a way that when you get better at it, you're not just getting better at the exercise, but when you encounter things in the real world, you will also be better and faster at those. So here's one example I can give you, right? Hey, this is actually, we're on audio. We can do this together on the microphone. So hey, if you take your fingers, everyone can follow along, you too, and put them on your on kind of your throat, your voice box, you know, the part that vibrates when you talk.
Yeah.
And now let's make a sound. Make the sound ba, kind of like a bottle. Ba,
Ba,
ba.
ba, ba.
If you do it a couple times, you'll feel that your lips open at the same time your voice box starts to vibrate. Ba.
Ba, ba,
But now
ba,
make a different sound. Now make a sound like a pa, like my papa.
pa, pa, pa,
You do
pa.
that, notice your lips actually open just a little bit before your voice box starts to vibrate. There's just the shortest pause between when your lips open and your voice box vibrates. Pa. And that's actually one of the differences between a ba and a pa sound. There's a gap of maybe 20 or 30 milliseconds. Now that doesn't sound like much, right? You, me, maybe many people listening on the show, we can hear those sounds all day long. We're good with that. But a lot of people have a brain that's kind of slowed down for whatever reason, right? Maybe you're a kid with a learning disability. Maybe you're a young person and you fell off your motorcycle and got a head injury, right? Maybe you're coming back from the war and you had some blast exposure, right? Your brain has typically slowed down. And for those people, when their brain has slowed down, they actually can't tell that 20 millisecond gap. They don't notice it very well. And so speech actually is confusing for them. You know, we're talking pretty quickly and fluently right now, but if your brain's slowed down, you can't follow all those little fast parts of speech. So speech sounds a little muddy. You have a hard time focusing on it. You feel kind of foggy. And then you're the kind of person who at work, maybe your boss is like, well, why doesn't this guy ever follow directions? Why can't he remember what I'm asking him to do? So when we build brain training exercises, we can actually build a brain training exercise that focuses on that little gap in speech so that we can make your brain better at distinguishing things like ba's and pa's. And then when you're out in the regular world and your boss is talking to you very quickly and you have to remember 12 different things, your brain is actually ready to receive that information quickly and accurately. And as a result, you have better attention and better memory. And so that's really the difference between brain training and video games in that way. There's probably not a video game that's going to help your brain in that way, but we've built brain training exercises and then shown in clinical trials with academic collaborators that they improve things like your ability to remember speech in noisy environments and so forth. Now, all that being said, I think you asked at the beginning, are video games a waste of time? And, you know, I love video games. I've played video games my whole life. I've played video games with both my kids. I think they've been a really positive influence on my life and my life's kids. My kids' lives. We have things to do together. I think they, you know, help us have fun together and even work on our brains to some extent. And so I would never say that video games are bad. You know, there's all this thought out there that video games cause social isolation or things like that. And I really don't think they do. I think they can bring us together in a really positive, fun way.
Well, thank you. That was more. That blew my question out of the water, I have to tell you.
You should jump in anytime. Don't let me just monologue like an evil dictator.
So when lots of people think of brain training, they think of the old DS games, which I believe were told that they didn't actually make that much of a difference. What would you comment on them exactly?
Yeah, you know, I actually know that scientific literature pretty well, which is maybe no surprise to you. You know, and they came from a good place. There was a researcher in Japan, Dr. Kawashima, who became very famous as a result of being in video. But, you know, where he started actually was working with patients who have dementia or early stage Alzheimer's disease in Japan. And his belief was, hey, these patients are almost being warehoused, right? We're just putting them in a home and then they don't really have anything to do. So if I engage their brains like at all, would that be better than nothing? And he took these very simple brain exercises to these patients with early stage Alzheimer's. And, you know, he had them read out loud or he had them write down numbers and try and do addition. It was all kind of pencil and paper stuff. And in fact, the earliest evidence that came out of that was kind of promising in a small scale way that, hey, since they're not doing anything, let's give them something and that'll probably be better, right? You bring a starving man food, he feels like he's better off than he was. And then, of course, Nintendo took that idea and worked with him and, turned that into these brain games. And the thing about those brain games is, of course, they never went through any clinical trials.
Yeah.
And to the extent that anyone did put them in clinical trials where you say, hey, let's take 100 people and half of them do Nintendo Brain Age and, half of them do something else like a placebo. Maybe they do crossword puzzles or something. Those studies mostly weren't done. And when they were done, they really didn't show that they could improve cognitive function in healthy older people or younger people. And that's really what makes them brain games. Were they fun? I guess, some people like Paper Mario and some people like brain training. But were they really brain training in the sense that were they shown scientifically to improve your cognitive function? And the answer is really no. And the biggest difference between those exercises on the Nintendo and what we're doing at BrainHQ is that those exercises on the Nintendo were very focused on, what's the right way to put it? Things that sound smart, I guess would be the way I would put it, right? They have you add a lot of numbers, and we all kind of feel like, well, math was hard when I was in middle school, so I guess I must be smart if I can do math, right? But that doesn't really actually fix how the brain works. If we're going to make a brain better and we're going to make it be faster and have better attention and better memory, we're really going to have to understand the underlying neurobiology of what gives a person bad speed or bad attention and bad memory. And it turns out that's really about how quickly and accurately your brain processes information, like the little ba-pa thing we did. If your brain is fast and accurate enough to keep up with that, well, you're going to have good attention when people are talking to you and you're going to remember things. And if your brain is slow, well, you're not going to have good attention. You're not going to have good memory. And so the exercises we built in BrainHQ, because we've just spent a lot of time thinking about brains and how they work, they're really focused on what you might think of as these root causes of processing speed declines or memory declines or attention declines. And as a result, we can kind of get in there and improve how the brains work.
So just taking out of BrainHQ and interactivity and stuff like that, it sounds like the basis is to help things like dementia. Keeping the brain active is really important. Is there anything that you would say on a basic level as human beings to human beings that we can do to make sure we keep our brains active?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things we can do. And in fact, we're learning a lot more about brain health almost every week at this point, I would say. And first of all, the biggest thing, and it sounds like you know this already, and I'm sure your listeners do as well, is that we need to not think of the brain as just like a machine that wears out and there's nothing we can do about it, right? The brain is constantly reorganizing and rebuilding itself. And so a lot of things have an influence on the health of our brain, the same way that a lot of things have an influence on the health of our heart. So when we think about brain health, for example, even things like physical exercise has been shown to improve cognitive function. And physical exercise actually improves certain growth factors in the brain that are required to keep the brain healthy. So, going out and going for a bike ride, going out and, doing, any kind of intensive aerobic activity is good for brain health. Turns out sleep is good for brain health. Right, we live in a culture where we don't value sleep, right? Everyone's like, oh, well, I get by on 4 hours of sleep a night. I'm so productive, right? As a brain scientist, if you hear someone saying that to you, just tell them to shut up. I mean, that's just a terrible idea for brain health, right? You may not think you're doing anything while you're asleep, but your brain's quite busy while you're asleep. Your brain is actually rehearsing everything you did during the day before and laying down memories based on what worked and trying to get rid of stuff that didn't work. So sleep is important. It's almost certainly a role for diet and nutrition, right? There's more and more evidence that eating a brain healthy diet, and I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's all the things that are composed of a regular healthy diet, leafy green vegetables, whole grains, berries, and things like that. There's increasing evidence that this helps preserve cognitive function and prevent dementia. And then of course, there's ordinary cognitive activities that can keep a brain healthy. And, we are building brain training exercises. They're like a specialized intensive version of those cognitive activities. But, and people say, hey, what can I do just in an everyday way beyond doing BrainHQ, a brain training program? We can divide things kind of in two ways, right? A lot of people come to me and they say, well, how about crossword puzzles? I do a lot of crossword puzzles. Am I going to be fine? And I hate to say it because it's always kind of a downer, but there's just no evidence that doing crossword puzzles helps preserve brain function. And in fact, what the best evidence tells us is that, hey, if you do a lot of crossword puzzles, you probably have better brain function. But that's mostly because people with better brain function like to do crossword puzzles. It's not because the crossword puzzles actually help improve brain function. And, so why is that? Why don't crossword puzzles work, right? They seem like the kind of thing that smart people do. So if I want to be a smart person, it seems like I should do crossword puzzles. But it doesn't really work that way. The problem with crossword puzzles is really twofold. If you think about doing a crossword puzzle, most of the time you're actually not doing anything, right? You're just sitting there trying to think of a 4-letter word for a leafy vegetable. And you're just kind of sitting there thinking. You're not Rich Tree. And you're not really... it feels like your brain is thinking, but your brain's not really processing information, right? And the other problem with crossword puzzles is that if you like them, you tend to do a lot of them. But if there's one thing your brain does not like, it's being in a rut, right? Doing the same thing over and over again, this doesn't help brain health at all because your brain just goes on to autopilot. And so when I think about everyday activities people can do to improve their brain health, I think about things that improve, speed and accuracy. So instead of crossword puzzles, how about something like, how about learning a new language, right? When you learn a new language, it feels like it's going by very fast at first, right? I think all of us have had that experience. Why does someone who's not speaking English talk so fast? And they don't actually talk any faster, right? We're just not used to the sounds that they're making. And so learning a new language, right? And there's a million apps you can get on your phone these days. That paying attention to those rapid sounds and retraining your brain actually helps make your brain faster and more accurate. How about something like, ping pong, right? Again, I don't care about playing ping pong one way or the other, but think about what your brain has to do. It has to be fast, right? The ball's coming. It has to control your arm quickly to hit the ball back. You have to control the intensity by which you hit so it doesn't go through far. Right? So any kind of activities like this that require your brain to be fast and accurate are likely to be kind of the everyday ones that help improve brain health. And then a big part of that just has to be novelty, right? If you've been playing ping pong for 20 years, God bless you, that's fantastic. But from a brain health perspective, your brain probably needs something new to keep it healthy. Maybe it's time to pick up a musical instrument or what have you.
Yeah, I suppose if you're Forrest Gump, you've already overanalyzed every which way the ball can come at you, and your brain doesn't have a challenge at that point.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. Think about learning to ride a bike, right? Do you ride a bike?
Yeah.
Okay, so when you were younger and you learned, it's really hard, right? Your whole brain has to work at it. If you watch a kid learn a bike, right, you can see their whole brain is like working on staying balanced and pedaling. But now when you ride a bike, I bet you can ride one-handed. I bet you can ride and listen to music. Your brain doesn't really have to work that hard. And that's because it's taken this skill and it's taken it from something that has to engage your whole brain to do it because it's new. And it's turned into something that's frankly automatic. Right? And so it requires very little of your brain. And we can actually see this with brain imaging experiments. We can see that as people learn something, the whole brain is lighting up, right? It's trying to figure out how to do this. And then as you get better at it, less and less of the brain becomes active because the brain wants to turn things into automatic activities. The brain's lazy in that sense, right? It wants to do as little work as possible. But if we want to keep it healthy, kind of like how we want to keep our bodies healthy, well, we have to make our brains do some work, whether they like it or not, I'm afraid.
It reminds me of starting a new job. The first day you're just overwhelmed. You want to do all these new things. A year later, maybe not so much. It's about time you look for something else if you're just feeling a bit,
Well, this is one of the interesting challenges about brain health because, we're a kid, we're growing up in high school and, we're making a lot of new friends and we're learning people and we're trying to figure out our place in the world. And maybe you go away to school or maybe you get a job and you leave home. You have to figure out how to live on your own and do your job. Like it's so much work for your brain. But then naturally, as we hit our 30s or even our 40s, we want to be good at things, right? It's generally more fun to be good at something than not good at something. And so as we get to be good at something, maybe in a job, you get a couple promotions and you're kind of, doing the same thing, but at a higher level now, that's success in your life and your career, but it starts to be not healthy for your brain because it hasn't got any new challenges. And then maybe you get a little older and you think, well, should I move to a new city for a new opportunity? Well, I'm living here and I know where all the good shops are and I know how the buses work. And, your brain doesn't want that challenge. And so I think the challenge for really all of us as we go through life is to figure out, hey, what are the things that we want to keep working on to get better, to become professionally successful? But what are the things where we want to challenge ourselves and be doing new things, right? And for a lot of people, that's in their hobbies, right? Every few years, maybe pick up a new hobby or, something like that. But in other times, maybe it's really worth picking up stakes and moving to a new city, making new friends, all those kinds of things to keep your brain healthy. But it is work, right? Our brains want to sit back and rest on their laurels, and we need to ask more from our brains than that.
I feel like we're a few sentences away from making a thesis on midlife crisis. You work all these years and then all of a sudden, no, I want a Mercedes Benz and a flashy job now. Leave me alone, life.
I think you're very much on the right track. I think there is a real link between depression as like a mood outcome and then lack of new learning. I think that as we get into a rut and our brains stop learning new things, I think that actually contributes at a very biological level to our mood health. And in fact, some of the thinking around depression these days is that the way these antidepressive drugs work, Prozac and so forth, is they probably help the brain be more plastic and capable of change. They don't unto themselves maybe help depression, but by allowing your brain to start to change, they allow you to do some different things. And in that way, you can then start working on changing your own brain in that way. So there's a lot to be figured out, but I think you're right. I think, when we're in the same rut all the time, that can contribute not just to biological brain health, but to bad moods and things like that. Our brains know they want challenge.
Brains are complex is what you're saying.
As they say, it's the most complex structure in the universe, as far as anyone can tell, in terms of the number of cells and how they connect and so forth and so on. As you mentioned, that one fun thing about the brain is, you look at the brain, and of course, it's got however many billions of neurons and trillions of connections. There's actually more information that's required to build a brain than can be found in the entire human genome. Or put another way, the brain is too complex to be encoded in your genes. And so then you ask the question, well, how does the brain get so complex? And the answer is, it builds itself. It's not exactly encoded, like your genes do not encode every structure in your brain, but they kind of encode the way to build a simple brain. And then you go out into the world and your brain gets more complex through the things you do.
It is mind-boggling, just the way it all works. And I'm glad that you're here, so I don't have to do it. Speaking of other roles in life and stuff like that, here at UDS, we don't just talk about one topic, we talk about many. You sound like you are tuned in to the things you like in life. You're a very successful PhD man, if I do say so myself. But if you could take part, collaborate on anything that you haven't yet, what would your dream thing be?
If I could collaborate on anything that I haven't yet, what would my dream thing be?
Are you a secret Batman fan and you just want to be an extra in the background or something like that?
I've played a lot of Overwatch, and I would really love to get to GM one day. Speaking of impossible dreams like that, that's probably one along those kinds of lines. Ever since I was a kid, my mom raised me reading a lot of science fiction books when I was very young. Got me to think about a lot of those things. And I'm probably still one of those people who grew up thinking, man, if there was ever a way to get on that spaceship and go off and tour the moons of Jupiter or see what the Earth looked like from outer space, that would just be probably something to do that I've thought about ever since I was a little kid. So ever since my mom raised me in that way, that would be a real thrill.
We like to advocate positivity here. One of my personal mantras is you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So just go into the unknown and you'll be, more of a person otherwise. Do you have anything that you inspires yourself that you'd like to share?
I very much agree with that philosophy. I will say that. I think, in all the things we do, whether they're simple, small things in our everyday or whether they're big life choices that we make, I think that, we should view those things not so much as are they good or bad, or will I like it or will I not like it, but we should view them from, hey, how is this going to change me so that at the end of it, I've learned something, I've gained something from this experience, whether it was good or bad, right? But at least I've had it, I can look back on it. So when I finished my PhD, I took a few months off. I had just gotten married, and my wife and I had a little bit of time before our job started, and we traveled around the world. We took off from San Francisco and headed west, and then went the whole way around over the course of 3 months. So first of all, it's round. I can confirm that. If you have anyone in your audience who's still got doubts, we went west and we came back to where we started. So there you go. But like you say, there was a ton of those pieces that involved kind of jumping off a little bit into the unknown. And one I remember in particular, we were in Indonesia, and we wanted to go to this small island called Flores, which has these mineral lakes and so forth. It's right near the island of Komodo, where the Komodo dragons are. And we didn't know what we were doing. We just landed in Indonesia, so we bought these airplane tickets and took this little tiny plane off to Flores and landed on the smallest airport you could ever imagine. And didn't speak any Bahasa Indonesia, and found out when we landed there that although we thought we'd be able to fly back a day or two later, it turned out it was a remote island, and we were going to spend a week there before the plane went back, whether we liked it or not. And of course, there's this moment of terror, like, oh my God, what have we got ourselves into? But then, adopting the philosophy of the upside down shark, even though I hadn't met you yet, and they're like, well, let's just see what's going to happen here. And of course, we had a fantastic experience and met amazing people and saw incredible sights, and slept in straw huts and ate nasi goreng and
embraced it.
And you're like, you know what? Why was I so nervous about that? The only thing that I had to be, afraid of is fear itself, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt once told us. And I think that's a healthy attitude towards just about all things. There are exceptions. You shouldn't go to a COVID party without a mask and see what it's like to get COVID, But I think most things that happen in life that offer the opportunity for a new experience, like you say, you should grab them. It's going to change your brain, and probably for the better.
We are part of Upside Down Shark. What's your favorite shark? There's the wing head, the scoop head, Bruce from Finding Nemo, Jaws.
Well, my favorite shark. Well, that is a great question as well. I guess my favorite shark is, I guess I'm going to be a little bit of a traditionalist and pick the hammerhead. Just because it's such a fascinating animal to look at with its eyes on the side of its head. And as a biologist, all you can think about when you see a hammerhead shark is, wow, what does that animal do? And what's it been doing over millions of years that's made it like, that's the right way to have my head? And I love that feeling of curiosity that comes out of the natural world.
The in-between evolution cycle, like what must it have looked at to come like that eventually?
And boy, is that really the best? It seems like you could do better, but who am I to argue with a billion years of shark evolution?
Thank you for your time, Henry. For anyone wondering what BrainHQ is, before you go, could you quickly just give us what it is and why we should use it?
Yeah, sure. So, we've been talking here about changing the brain through experience, and BrainHQ is a brain training program. And in fact, anyone who wants to try it can go to www.brainhq.com. And in fact, if you register, it'll give you a free exercise to do every day. So you can try it out and see if it's something that you or someone in your family might enjoy and benefit from. And fundamentally, it's designed to do that, designed to sharpen and make your brain faster and more accurate, and improve cognitive function and improve real life in that way.
Well, thank you very much for your time. You've been a delight.
It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for reaching out. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Henry. Till next time. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.